A maid stumbles upon a hidden door in a mansion, one that's been sealed for years, but the truth she uncovers will change everything. Stay tuned to discover a secret that leaves everyone speechless. In the heart of a sprawling estate, behind tall iron gates and amidst the whispers of wealth, lived a man whose mansion, though filled with luxury, echoed with a deep, unsettling loneliness. Marcus Westbrook, the enigmatic billionaire businessman, had everything a person could desire: opulent furnishings, state-of-the-art technology, and the admiration of thousands. But beneath the polished surface, there was something missing. His mansion, once a symbol of success, felt more like a prison. It was a reminder of the emptiness he'd felt ever since his beloved wife passed away in a tragic accident. Into this grand but lonely world came Claire, a woman with a humble heart and a resilience that matched her struggles. A single mother, Claire had taken on the grueling job of housekeeping at Marcus's mansion, desperate to provide for her young daughter, Lily. Though Marcus's life appeared perfect from the outside, Claire knew that her family's daily struggle was far different than the opulence surrounding her. Claire's first day at the mansion was filled with mixed emotions. The grandeur of the place overwhelmed her, yet it was the emptiness that stood out the most. She had to keep reminding herself that she was here for a reason. Lily needed her. While she worked through the mansion's cavernous rooms, sweeping away dust from antique furniture and polishing surfaces that shone like glass, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the mansion's stillness. The housekeeper, Mrs. Vernon, a stern woman who had worked there for years, gave Claire strict instructions to stay in the areas that were deemed safe. But there was one part of the mansion that always caught her attention: the forbidden corridor. This particular hallway was off-limits, the one place Claire was told never to enter. It was locked and tightly sealed, and the air around it felt heavy with secrecy. Curiosity gnawed at her, but Claire had learned to push such thoughts aside, reminding herself that her job was to clean, not to explore. Days passed, and Claire's curiosity about the mysterious corridor only deepened. She couldn't help but notice that there was something peculiar about the area. The old wooden door at the end of the hall, which seemed to have been untouched for years, almost beckoned her. As she dusted the furniture in the nearby rooms, she often found herself glancing down the hall, wondering what lay behind that door. One evening, as she cleaned the grand staircase, she overheard a conversation between Marcus and his personal assistant. They spoke in hushed tones about something important, but the mention of a secret piqued Claire's interest. The word lingered in the air long after their voices had faded. What secret could the mansion possibly hold? Was it related to the locked corridor? For the first time, Claire found herself considering the possibility that there was more to the mansion than just its lavish appearance. Perhaps it wasn't just Marcus's life that was filled with sorrow. Perhaps the house itself held a darker truth. Unable to contain her growing curiosity any longer, Claire made a decision. One evening, after her work was finished and everyone else had retired for the night, she would venture down that forbidden corridor. Her heart raced as she made her way through the dark, quiet mansion. The house felt alive with secrets, and Claire couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a story long buried. She approached the locked door, which seemed even more imposing up close. The old wood creaked under her touch as she gently pressed against it, but the door refused to budge. That was when she noticed something she hadn't before: a small keyhole hidden beneath the dust. Claire's pulse quickened. Had someone been here recently? Was this door meant to stay sealed forever? With the house asleep, Claire's thoughts raced, as she wondered if this was the night she would uncover the truth. Late that night, Claire returned to the corridor with nothing but a flashlight in her hand. Her breath came in quick, quiet bursts, her heart pounding in her chest as she approached the locked door once more. This time, she had something new: a small, ornate key she had found hidden in a drawer in the library, tucked inside a dusty old envelope. The key seemed ancient, yet it fit perfectly into the lock. With a soft click, the door creaked open. The room beyond was unlike anything Claire had ever seen. It was a forgotten space, completely untouched by time. The walls were lined with dusty portraits of people she didn't recognize, their eyes following her every move. There were ancient bookshelves, their contents covered in thick layers of dust, and a large ornate mirror that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. At the center of the room stood a single peculiar object: a large chest, aged and cracked with time, but still sturdy. Claire's fingers trembled as she moved toward it. The chest was locked, but the key Claire had found earlier worked perfectly. As the lid opened, a cloud of dust rose into the air, and the soft creaking of old wood echoed through the room. Inside, to Claire's shock, were letters, dozens of them, neatly stacked and tied with a worn ribbon. The letters appeared old, the ink faded, and some had even begun to disintegrate at the edges. But what struck Claire most was the name on the first letter, Marcus Crawford. Her hands shook as she began reading, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. The letters detailed Marcus's life, but not the life he had shared with her. These letters were written to someone named Isabel, someone Claire had never heard of. As Claire read further, it became clear that Marcus had been involved in a deeply passionate, yet tragic love affair. The last letter, dated years before, seemed to end abruptly, its contents too painful to finish. The ink was smeared, as if the writer had been overcome with emotion. Claire's mind raced. What did this mean? Who was Isabel? And why had Marcus kept these letters hidden away for so long? As Claire read through the final letter, a sense of unease settled in her chest. The last lines, smudged with ink, were difficult to decipher, but there was no mistaking the emotion in them. The words, "I never meant to hurt you, Isabel, but I couldn't let go. I am so sorry," seemed to haunt her. It felt as though she was intruding on a secret, a piece of Marcus's past that he had never intended for anyone to see. The more Claire thought about it, the more she realized how little she truly knew about Marcus's life before they had met. His mysterious nature, his reluctance to speak about his past, it all began to make sense. Could it be that these letters had something to do with the strange occurrences she had witnessed in the house? The whispers in the walls, the cold drafts in rooms that should have been sealed, and the inexplicable sense that someone was watching her. Determined to uncover more, Claire took the letters back to her room. She spent hours poring over them, trying to piece together the puzzle of Marcus's life. As she read, she noticed something that she had missed before: small, cryptic symbols that seemed to appear in the margins of some pages, like a code. Could these symbols hold the key to understanding the connection between Marcus and Isabel? Or perhaps they were a clue to something even deeper, something hidden in the house itself? With the letters in hand, Claire made her way back to the mansion's library, where she had noticed some strange symbols in a book she had found earlier. As she opened the dusty tome, her heart skipped a beat. The symbols in the book matched those she had seen in the letters. They were part of an ancient language, one that seemed to have been lost to time. The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. These symbols weren't just decorative or meaningless. They were a message that Marcus had left behind, perhaps as a warning or a guide. As Claire deciphered more of the symbols, she learned that they led to a hidden part of the mansion, one that no one had ever mentioned before. The instructions were clear. Follow the path beneath the old oak tree in the garden. Dig where the roots meet the stone. Claire's pulse quickened. It was as though the house itself was speaking to her, urging her to uncover something long buried. Her curiosity consumed her, but fear lingered. What would she find if she followed the clues? Would it lead to the answers she sought about Marcus's past? Or would it uncover something darker, something that had been buried for a reason? Claire couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion was alive with secrets, with memories, with history. As she stood beneath the ancient oak tree in the garden, the wind rustled through the leaves, sending a chill down her spine. She had followed the instructions from the letters meticulously, and now, here she was, on the brink of discovering something that could change everything. Her hands trembled as she began to dig where the roots met the stone, her mind racing with thoughts of what she might uncover. Minutes felt like hours as she worked tirelessly, the earth yielding slowly to her efforts. Finally, she felt the cold metal of a rusted box buried deep in the soil. Heart pounding, Claire carefully pulled it from the ground, brushing away the dirt to reveal its contents. The box was old, its surface scratched and weathered, but the lock was still intact. She hesitated for a moment, but then her curiosity won out. With a sharp twist, the lock gave way, and the lid creaked open, revealing a stack of faded papers inside. But there was more. Beneath the papers lay a small, intricately carved wooden box. With shaking hands, Claire opened the wooden box. Inside, nestled among velvet lining, was a pendant that she instantly recognized. It was the same one Marcus wore, a pendant she had seen him wear on their first meeting. But how could it be here, buried beneath the tree? What did it mean? As Claire turned the pendant over in her hands, something else caught her eye. Etched into the back was a name, Isabel Montgomery. The realization hit her like a wave. The pendant wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a link to the past, to the woman whose memory had haunted Marcus for so long. Suddenly, Claire's thoughts were interrupted by a noise behind her. She spun around, heart racing, but there was no one there. Yet the sensation of being watched was unmistakable. She stood frozen for a moment, every nerve on edge. Then the air shifted. The mansion itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Claire's pulse quickened as she felt a presence near her. Something intangible but undeniably real. It was Marcus. He had been standing there watching her. She could see the pain in his eyes, the years of grief and guilt that he had buried beneath a cold exterior. Claire's stomach churned as she realized what had been unfolding, what was about to unfold. With a voice barely above a whisper, Marcus spoke. "You weren't supposed to find that." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Claire, still gripping the pendant in her hand, looked at him in shock. For the first time, she saw the cracks in his facade. The man she had known, the man she thought was simply distant and brooding, was now revealed to be someone entirely different, a man haunted by his past, by the memory of Isabel. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. He told her of Isabel, of how they had been in love, and of how her death had torn him apart. But there was something more, something darker that had kept him from ever truly moving on. Isabel hadn't died by accident. It was no simple tragedy. The secrets of the mansion, the symbols in the letters, and the pendant were all connected to her death, a death that Marcus had never been able to escape. As Marcus revealed the truth, Claire felt a wave of shock and sorrow wash over her. The pain in his voice, the regret in his eyesight all made sense now. Isabel had been more than a lost love. She had been the key to unlocking the mystery of the mansion and Marcus's own demons. Claire was still grappling with the enormity of Marcus's confession. As he continued to speak, the weight of his words seemed to fill the air around them, the tension thick enough to cut through. The pendant in her hand suddenly felt heavier, like an anchor pulling her into a past she wasn't prepared to understand. Marcus led her back toward the mansion, the cold stones beneath their feet, echoing their footsteps in the silence. With every step, Claire's mind raced. She was certain that what Marcus had just revealed wasn't the end of the story. There had to be more. As they reached the front door of the mansion, Marcus hesitated, as if uncertain of whether he should continue. Finally, he turned to her and whispered, "T, here is one more thing. The mansion itself, it knows what happened. It's been watching, waiting for someone to uncover the truth." Claire's breath caught in her throat. She glanced around, feeling as if the walls themselves were alive, observing her, waiting for her to react. She realized that the mansion, this place that had once seemed so grand and inviting, was also a silent witness to the darkness that had unfolded within it. Marcus stepped inside the mansion, moving toward a grand staircase at the end of the hall. Claire followed him, her pulse quickening as they ascended, the creaking of the floorboards beneath their feet a stark reminder of how much history lay hidden here. When they reached the top of the stairs, Marcus paused before a large door at the end of the corridor. "This is it," he said, voice barely audible. Marcus turned the knob and pushed the door open, revealing a room that Claire had never seen before, room that had been locked away for as long as the mansion itself had stood. Inside, the room was shrouded in darkness, but the air felt thick, charged with a strange energy. Claire stepped in, her eyes adjusting to the dim light that filtered in from a narrow window high up on the wall. The walls were lined with old bookshelves, their contents obscured by dust and neglect. In the center of the room, however, was a large painting, a portrait of a woman Claire recognized instantly. It was Isabel. But this was no ordinary portrait. The eyes of the woman in the painting seemed to follow her, almost as though the woman was alive, staring directly at her. As Claire moved closer to examine the painting, Marcus stepped forward and gently took the pendant from her hand. He placed it around the woman's neck in the portrait. The moment the pendant touched the painting, something strange happened. The entire room seemed to tremble, as if the house itself were coming alive. Suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled, and Claire gasped as the bookshelves began to move. A hidden passage was revealed, a dark, narrow tunnel leading deep into the earth. Marcus's expression was grim as he looked at her one last time. "This is the truth you weren't meant to uncover," he said. And with that, the two of them stepped into the darkness, the secrets of the mansion beckoning them forward. The air in the underground tunnel felt cooler now, a stark contrast to the intense heat of the chamber they had just left. Claire's heart continued to pound as she and Marcus walked through the long, dark passage. The weight of their discoveries hung heavy in the air. Each step deeper into the tunnel seemed to bring them closer to some kind of inevitable end. The mansion's secrets, though unveiled, were still heavy with mystery. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion wasn't done with them yet. The pendant, the painting, the underground altar, all of it felt like a web of fate that had been spun long before their arrival. The path they walked now felt like the final chapter, but something told Claire that there was more they still needed to understand. With every step they took, the air grew thicker, and Claire could feel the atmosphere around them shifting. The walls seemed to press in from every side, the dim light flickering as if to warn them of something approaching. The tunnel ahead seemed endless, but Claire felt Marcus's steady presence beside her. He had become more than a stranger. He was tied to this place, as much as she now was. They reached the end of the tunnel and emerged into a large, cavernous chamber. The underground space stretched out in all directions, its size intimidating. High stone columns rose to the ceiling, where faded murals of strange symbols adorned the walls. The floor was uneven, and the faint smell of earth and age filled the air. It was a space lost in time, untouched by the outside world, but full of memories that Marcus could no longer escape. Marcus led Claire toward the center of the room, where a massive stone altar stood. It was old, carved with intricate patterns that seemed to tell stories of long-forgotten events. There was an undeniable weight to the altar, as if it had seen centuries of secrets unfold, bearing witness to pain, sorrow, and betrayal. It was the heart of the mansion's mysteries. Claire glanced around, her mind racing to piece together the fragments of the story she had learned. Isabel's image, the portrait in the secret room, and now this altar. They were all connected, but in ways that Claire could not fully comprehend. It was clear, though, that this place was not just an abandoned chamber. It was the foundation of everything that had transpired, the origin of the mansion's haunting history. Marcus stood beside the altar, his face drawn and tired, as though the weight of the past had finally caught up to him. Claire could see the anguish in his eyes, the inner conflict he had struggled with for so long. This place, this cursed chamber, had been the backdrop for everything that had gone wrong. As he traced his fingers along the stone, he spoke softly, his voice thick with emotion. "This is where it all began, Claire. Isabel's betrayal. The loss we both felt, it all happened here, in this very room. The mansion kept its secrets, kept its hold on us, for too long." Claire was stunned by the revelation. Isabel had been the center of this tragedy. Marcus's relationship with her and her ultimate betrayal had caused a chain reaction that neither of them could escape. Claire's heart sank as she realized how much of Marcus's torment had been rooted in the loss of Isabel and his inability to move on. For a moment, Claire couldn't find the right words. There was so much more to this story than she had originally understood, so much more than she could have imagined. But then, as her gaze settled on the altar, she began to see the parallels between the past and their present. The room held the answers they needed, but it was also the key to their freedom. In a moment of clarity, Claire stepped closer to Marcus, her hand resting gently on his arm. "We can't change the past, but we can let it go. We can choose to be free of it." Her words broke through the tension that had gripped Marcus for so long. He looked at her, and for the first time Claire saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. The weight he had carried for so long seemed to ease, as though Claire's understanding, her willingness to move forward, had finally reached him. The chamber was still, and for the first time since they had entered the mansion, the atmosphere no longer felt oppressive. The walls, the symbols, and the altar, everything seemed to lose its power over them. It was as if the house itself had given them a final test, one that they had passed together. As they walked back toward the tunnel entrance, Claire felt a sense of peace beginning to settle in her heart. They had uncovered the truth, and now they were ready to leave the darkness behind. The mansion, with all its secrets, would remain in the past, just as the pain and regret that had bound them to it would. Together, Claire and Marcus stepped out of the underground chamber, the weight of the mansion's history no longer holding them back. The path ahead was still uncertain, but they were no longer prisoners of the past. As Claire and Marcus emerged from the mansion's depths, the daylight seemed almost unreal, as if the world outside had been waiting for their return. The oppressive weight of the mansion no longer hung over them, and with each step they took away from the dark corridors they had just uncovered, it felt like they were stepping into a new chapter of their lives. The air felt fresher. The sounds of the outside world, louder life outside the mansion, was continuing, unaffected by the shadows that had once ruled their every move. The mansion, its mysteries, and the people it had bound together would no longer dictate their futures. Claire's heart, once burdened with confusion and fear, now felt lighter, filled with the possibility of something new. She glanced at Marcus, her companion through this harrowing journey. They had both shed the past, at least in the sense that it would no longer haunt them. What lay ahead, neither of them knew for sure, but there was a shared sense of resolve in their silence as they walked. Marcus had found a kind of peace he hadn't thought possible. Though the mansion had taken so much from him, it had also led him to a place of clarity. Claire had shown him the power of moving on, of choosing to let go rather than remain shackled to history. For Marcus, the decision had been both difficult and liberating. The weeks that followed felt like a slow, quiet healing. Marcus, now free from the grip of the mansion's mysteries, made a decision that would alter the course of his life. The mansion, once a place of deep personal torment, would be sold, its halls no longer housing the weight of betrayal, regret, and unanswered questions. It would become someone else's story, someone else's secret to uncover. Claire, too, had found her footing again. She had returned to her life outside the mansion, but with a renewed sense of confidence. Her work, her relationships, and her sense of self had all been impacted by the time she spent in the mansion. She no longer saw herself as a mere maid. She had become a woman capable of facing the darkest parts of life and emerging stronger. There was a subtle joy in the knowledge that she had helped Marcus find the closure he so desperately needed. As the weeks turned into months, both Claire and Marcus began to rebuild their lives. They didn't know what the future held, but they understood now that they were both capable of starting anew. The mansion no longer loomed over them. It had been left behind, a relic of the past. One day, Claire received a letter from Marcus. He had used the money from selling the mansion to fund a new endeavor, one that would make a lasting impact. In his letter, Marcus spoke about how he had been inspired to help others who had experienced similar loss and grief. He had opened a foundation dedicated to helping people find the closure they needed to move forward, just as he had. For Claire, the letter was a bittersweet reminder of the journey they had taken together. She realized that Marcus's transformation was a testament to how far they had both come. She had played a part in that change, and that realization filled her with pride. It was the kind of closure she hadn't known she needed. In her own life, Claire began to forge new paths. She reunited with old friends and focused on rebuilding her relationships. The pain of the past didn't disappear, but it no longer defined her. She had grown stronger, and with that strength came the ability to look forward to the future, whatever it might hold. As the years passed, the mansion that once symbolized pain and loss faded into the background of their lives. Both Marcus and Claire had moved on, finding peace and healing in the everyday moments they had once taken for granted. The mansion was no longer a haunting presence. It was simply a place where they had once faced their darkest fears, and through that journey they had found the courage to step into the light. Marcus continued his work with the foundation, helping others, just as he had promised. He found joy in knowing that his past, though painful, had given him the strength to change lives for the better. Claire, too, found fulfillment in the new life she had built. While their paths had diverged, they remained forever connected by the experiences they had shared in that mansion. The final chapter of the mansion story was written, and both Marcus and Claire were finally free to live their own stories. Their journey, filled with pain, discovery, and transformation, was a reminder that no matter how dark the past may be, there is always a way forward. It was a lesson in healing, in letting go, and in the power of choice. The mansion stood empty, its secrets locked away forever. For Claire and Marcus, it was time to look ahead.